Jenny Pearsall. Whoa. And I'm a senior at St. Thomas Episcopal, and I'll be attending Furman University in the fall. Because I grew up in this church, the lines of where my faith actually started are kind of blurry, but my belief in God mostly came from watching the people around me who were so passionate about Him. From the time that I was doing the exact same thing that they just did, I realized that the grown-ups thought that this story was more important than any other one, and that I should think it was important too. As I continued to grow up, I learned more and more facts about the story. I learned the story of the cross and what communion meant, and a lot of Bible stories about Jonah and Noah, and learned some cute songs about Noah's Ark and the fruit of the Spirit, but I still didn't really understand what it meant in my life and in my heart. But looking back, I can see how patiently Jesus walked with me and taught me. I was reading through some of my old journals to kind of refresh my memory about my walk with Jesus from start till now, and I read things that I didn't even remember and that I didn't even realize at the time God was doing just to push me closer to Jesus. And it was clear that no matter how tiny the baby steps I were taking towards Jesus, God was walking right along with me. The verse that reminds me the most of my relationship with Jesus is 1 Peter 2:2 and 3. Like newborn babies, crave pure spiritual milk, so that by it you may grow up in your salvation, now that you have tasted that the Lord is good. I love this verse and how we're compared to the infants. And I think about myself as an infant. My parents told me that I cried a lot, and I was really bald and I had really big ears, so I wasn't really that cute. And it's true. And even though that I was just this screaming baby, my parents were joyful to feed me and to nourish me and to clean me up and carry me around when I was crying and to take care of me and protect me. And even more amazing than that is that Jesus is willing to do the same thing for us, not just when we're actually infants, but forever. And I'll never grow out of the stage where I need Jesus to feed me the truth of the gospel, the sweet truth of the gospel, and clean me up and carry me around when I'm sad. Middle school was smooth sailing for me. Grades came easily to me. I had a good family, nice friends, and I didn't really have to deal with anything too hard. So unfortunately, smooth sailing for me meant really high confidence in my own abilities and lots of pride that I was a really good person, whatever that means. I continued to learn about God's love through my youth leaders and my friends and my family, and at that point in my life, I decided that I wanted to follow Jesus, and I wanted to be a part of whatever it was that made these people so happy. But at the end of the day, the problem was still that I cared more about myself than about Jesus. I spent my entire freshman year of high school thinking that I was doing a pretty good job of being a Christian. I didn't drink, I didn't sneak out of the house, I wasn't mean to anybody, so I thought that I was doing a pretty good job comparatively to some other people in my high school. And I was content with that for a long time, until I finally realized that every thought and desire I had revolved around me, and that my idea of a Christian was very different of God's idea of a Christian. I distinctly remember being embarrassed and thinking, I can't pray to God today, I gossip today. I'll just wait a couple days until that kind of blows over and then I'll go to God, and maybe He won't remember and maybe I'll be worthy at that point. And when I finally, I was too prideful to accept God's grace and spent the better part of that summer trying to earn it, which didn't really work out so well. On a mission trip to New Orleans, Jesus broke through my pride, and I can remember singing Jesus Paid It All and really understanding what that disgusting crimson stain felt like for the first time, which made me appreciate how much we were washed white as snow and how merciful He is. Even though I finally realized that He wanted to wash me white as snow, just the way I was, it still took me a long time to be vulnerable in front of God and to come to Him knowing that I wasn't good enough and accepting that He wanted me anyway. Through a lot of prayers and through the love of my youth leaders and parents, I finally realized that he did want me anyway, and I accepted that. And this verse really helped me to get to the place where I believed it. You do not delight in sacrifice, or I would bring it. You do not take pleasure in burnt offerings. The sacrifices of God are a broken spirit, a broken and contrite heart. O God, you will not despise. And that was a big one for me, learning that Jesus wanted me and that it was okay that I was broken, and that was the best way that Jesus could love me, is when I realized that I was broken. The summer after my sophomore year, I was still trying to follow Jesus, and at that point, I went through a really bad breakup, which sounds really stupid, and it is pretty stupid, but at the time, I was really upset about it. And even though I look back on it now and think, why was I upset about that? That's so dumb. Jesus didn't belittle my feelings at all. And he comforted me and constantly reminded me that he was all I needed with this verse. My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. And over that summer, the comfort that I felt and the strength that I received from the Lord made me realize that I wanted Jesus more than anything else, and I wanted that comfort to follow me wherever I went, and that sense of peace to always be with me. Junior year presented new temptations that I never really thought that I would struggle with. The temptation to go to parties, the temptation to lie to my parents about where I was, the temptation to get involved with boys that I knew I shouldn't be involved with. I tried to resist those temptations with my own will for a long time, and didn't really acknowledge to God that I needed help, because I thought that I could do it, and then I would be worthy of God's love if I could figure it out on my own. But again, that didn't really work out so well for me, and I didn't have much success in resisting those temptations until God reminded me that it was for him. And this verse is something that I read a lot during that time that really helped me. Matthew 5, verse 30. And if your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to go into hell. And at first when I read that, I thought that it was really harsh, and I was thinking, great, now I have to cut off my arm. That's the only way I can, resist temptation. But the more that I read that verse, the more that I realized that it's the second part of that verse that's the important part. That it is better to cut it off, to not have those sins. It's better to not take part in the earthly pleasures than to not be with Jesus. And unfortunately, through experience, I learned that that's true. And now my faith is strong, that instead of just believing what the people always told me, that it is true, that I want to be with Jesus instead of doing whatever the temptations are. I feel blessed going off to college, knowing that Jesus will always be with me, and I'll never be alone, even though I'm going to Greenville, South Carolina, where I don't know anybody, and his joy will never leave me, and that he will never cease to keep feeding me spiritual milk and to keep nurturing me as his child and loving me as his child.